Hello and welcome to the Life Lessons podcast with me, Simon Mundie. This podcast has a simple mission: to have discussions that reveal something important about life and how best to live it. My guests range from the biggest sporting names on the planet through to neuroscientists, philosophers, psychologists, and world-renowned thinkers. We talk about things like how to skillfully relate to uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, the power of acceptance and psychological flexibility, how to get your circadian rhythms in sync to feel your best, right through to the nature of reality. These conversations and the bite-sized episodes have the power to change your life. This episode is with someone who was a boyhood hero of mine. Will Carling was hugely shocked when he was asked to be England captain at the very tender age of 22. He was the youngest player in the team at the time, and that appointment came as a shock to Will. It shocked his teammates and it shocked lots of pundits too. But it also coincided with a huge upturn in England's fortunes on the pitch. Under Will Carling's captaincy, England won 3 Five Nations Grand Slams in 1991, 1992 and 1995, and they reached the World Cup final for the first time in 1991, having been massive underachievers for years before that. But something I really admire about Will is he's not one of these people who dines out on past glories at all. As he says, that was then, this is now. His children were wholly unaware that he'd even played rugby for England for a very long time until some of their classmates at school brought it to their attention. And Will is someone who is all about his relationships. He's a massively devoted family man to his wife, to his kids. And he recognises that in comparison to the importance of his family and his other relationships, the success he enjoyed on the rugby pitch pales into insignificance. Now, we talk about loads of the lessons that Will learned and the journey he went on from being an ambitious young England rugby captain through to the family man he is now. And it's a really fascinating story. And he was just a joy to speak to. And I really hope you enjoy our conversation. Will Carling, how are you?
Very good. You?
I'm very well, thank you. Delighted to have you on. It's a real privilege.
I don't know what to say to that. It's embarrassing.
Well, you know, you're an England legend. Growing up, I watched and followed the England team that you were captain of as they won various Grand Slams and reached World Cup finals. And to be sat here with you now, it's one of those kind of, yep, that little child who I was as age 10 or 11 would be really chuffed with me now.
Jeez, you see, and I don't know how to take that because I'm not I'm the guy who wanders around. My kids tell me to grow up and not to be childish and stuff. So it's like it's always slightly uncomfortable when people talk. It's bizarre, isn't it?
So during the course of my research, I got a couple of quotes, some of yours and some of other people, and one describes you as a sensitive, reflective man. Is that right?
Yes, although pretends that he's neither.
Why do you pretend to be neither?
Oh, I don't know, because I think you...
Defence mechanism?
Yeah. I was sent away to an all-boys school when you're very young. You play rugby, which is meant to be, guys are meant to be tough. So the whole thing is you live, it's the facade, isn't it, that...
The tough guy exterior.
Well, not that anyone believed that, but not they certainly, not the sensitive, reflective bloke. Yeah, and highly sensitive, I would say.
Really?
Yeah.
Were you aware that you were highly sensitive even when you were playing?
Yeah.
Right.
And so it was a sort of continual conflict of this is not about you. So without jumping, if you're captain, you've got to pull that sort of stuff together because actually being sensitive is good, although not being hypersensitive and thinking, do they like me or they don't like me? It's just like actually slightly irrelevant, Will. It's about doing the right job. It's about, hopefully they might have some respect, but it's about doing what needs to be done for the team, not, they all think you're lovely,
Yeah. So the outer will and the inner will, let's say, at the peak of your fame when you were winning slams, were they quite different?
Yeah, completely. I mean,
chalk and cheese.
Yes, so there's the as was then this comic book hero, and then there was me, and it's really quite bizarre because it's just you are nowhere near, never was anywhere near that. There's bits of you that you can do certain things, but I've always found it very, very strange, and therefore, and it's been I would say a theme in my life. People sort of when they got to me go, "Oh, you're very different to what I thought you would be." I probably meaning boring, dull, all the rest of it, but just very different because I never was that.
When I get people on Don't Tell Me Score, I often try and speak to them ahead of time or send them an email and do an outline. I've found a much better strategy with you, which was talking to your wife. So she's given me a nice snapshot into what you're like. So, and it's fair to say, is it fair to say, that you have changed a lot from the start of your England rugby career through to now? Like, you've gone on a hell of a journey as a man.
Well, yeah, I think I sort of careered around and smashed into quite a few things and, left a few craters around the place and, made it a shed full of mistakes and quite interesting. Yes, I would think, and if you couldn't learn from all those bits and pieces, you'd be quite a strange kind of man. So, if I look back and think, when you were... And sometimes I do. You sort of, I don't know if you like. You sit driving the car on your own, whatever, and you listen. Suddenly, a track will come on that you used to listen to at school, and you'll be like, "Oh yeah, I remember listening to this at school." And then you used to think about what you were like at school, and what you hoped for, and what you thought you wanted to do, and what was important to you, and you think, "Wow, that's different."
Right. Oh, so your goals and aims weren't how your life has panned out when you were a young man.
I think your values were very different, and what you thought was important in life, and what you should strive for, and what would make you happy,
right.
Those kind of things. Like, and you're thinking, and suddenly you realise actually that's all just utter bloody rubbish. You realise so many bits when you're sort of 16 or 17 that you thought, God, I really want to do this. I need to have a sports car when I'm X. Whatever it is, that's cool. And you just thought, okay, and you get there, and it's just, that's just bloody irrelevant.
Yes, and it is, isn't it? And you talk about learning from or careering around and making mistakes and whatever else. And Lisa again told me, that you're very much someone who's all about learning from mistakes. And she gave me the example, and I've already mentioned this to you just before we started, about your daughter who's in show jumping. And she got disqualified from a race and was really peeved off with herself. And you said, yes, but you'll learn from it and you'll never do it again.
Yeah, I think, when it comes to your kids and all of them, it's just... You're trying to give them, it's almost not you're trying to coach, but you're just trying a little bit of guidance. And, she was all very upset because, the bell had gone and she'd gone just a little bit forward, whatever it was. And, and I would have won. And you go, but maybe for me, I'm always into looking for the positives. There's always something. Yeah. And I said, but Mames, you won't do it again. But also, and sometimes it's weird that you try to say to them, but learn. I sort of say to her as well, and Jack, the younger ones, and the older ones of a wee bit ahead. But it's like, but also learn from the things that go well. I think lots of people don't, because actually that's what you want to do again. So if you pay attention to what went into everything that happened, when it went well, what did you do? Because then try and replicate that. Because for her, you want to go clear, you want to do well. And for Jack, he's massively into his golf. You want to play good rounds. So when you do play good rounds, have a think about it, because that's what you should, you love it, but you think that's what you want to do more and more. So it's a little bit about, I just think from all the bits and pieces, there's stuff to take away from it.
And do you think you learn more from the positives or the tough times or the good times?
I think people naturally learn more from the tough times. But I think the interesting bit when you get into sport, when you get a team that starts to become successful, is you've got to try and learn from the good times as well. Otherwise, you will hit the bad times, and that becomes really hard when you then start talking about comfort zones and all the rest of it. But because I think most of us are naturally pretty lazy, and once we do okay for a while, we go, hey, we've got this sussed, and then you realise you haven't.
So it's just about learning from everything. So it's just learning is the key.
Learning and trying to improve. Learning and just pushing. If you're in sport, if you're in competition anywhere, you think you've got to be trying to improve, because the moment you don't improve, everyone else is, and then they'll have you. Yeah. So it's that's relentless and it's tiring, and it just is. But it's if you don't do it, you'll lose.
So was it all about looking to improve as a player when you were a younger man, and then it became more about trying to improve as like a man, father, husband, all those stuff?
Yeah, I think when you were young, I was obsessed with rugby, and so it was just watching people who I thought did it well and trying to learn from them and learn the things you got wrong. It was all about that, and then you realise as when that's over, that actually I sort of look back and that's just sort of what you did when almost like when you were a kid. It's a sport, and then you get into what for me is like real life and what's really important, and that's relationships and family, and yeah, definitely.
So before we get into your story and that, you've been through some rough times. Are you able to be grateful for all of them now?
Yeah, I sometimes Lisa and I sit and she talks about things that happen. I said I'm a believer that there's no point regretting things. We all make mistakes, and I think if you're happy where you are, you think that's the bit. It depends where you are, and therefore, yeah, there are bits that still make you cringe. You think, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, or I wish I hadn't. But it's you're
talking about Noel's house party, aren't you?
I think I am, yeah. First and foremost. But I just think we're all, you think, hey, be a bit easier on yourself, be a bit kind. And as long as you get to being a relatively okay person, then it doesn't really matter.
You're doing all right. So let's start age 6.
Yeah.
You were packed off, weren't you, to a boarding school? And I read that you remember thinking some, fairly, not overly generous or kind thoughts towards your mother. Even at that age, you were aware of what was going on and weren't happy about it.
No, and I sort of, although you want to talk honestly about stuff, my mum's, no longer around. It's just, yeah, I remember sort of saying, I basically, I don't want to go away. We were an army family, and I think my parents thought this is the right thing to do. You send your kids away, because there's always the inherent snobbery that goes with a huge part of elements of the army. And I just said, but hey, I don't want to. But at 6, before I was 7, I was off to school, and I do remember turning up and my mum talking to, I think it was the headmaster, and so I walked up the stairs. I thought, right, fine, I'll sort myself out. And
you can remember making that decision.
Yeah, I thought I can't really repeat it obviously on a show.
No,
but
you
it was
can
just
go for it.
No, but you just thought, right, sod it.
Yeah.
I've said to you I don't want to come here. You've taken me here. You're more interested, it seems to be, in talking to the headmaster. So I'm off. And I will. I'll sort myself out. And so for, I don't know, first 4 or 5 nights, you'd crawl down to the bottom of your bed under the covers and cry because you didn't want anyone to know. And after that, you sort of got on with it. But I think for me, probably, talking about the sense of, I think that had a massive impact on me, my family, from then on, actually.
Yeah. So that sensitivity you spoke about, part of it was born of that experience.
Yeah, and I think just that idea that, I wanted to be at home. I wanted to be part of the family. I didn't want to be, I didn't see my parents for sort of 3 months, and used to get a letter once a week. I mean, actually, when I look at sort of our kids and think, the thought of sending one of them away at 6, and you just think, I know they probably thought that's what you do, right? But I just, even if that's what you thought, that's what you do, you just don't do it, because I couldn't conceive of doing that. And so there's part of you that looks at your parents and think, how the hell did you do that? Why did you do that?
Yeah.
And I think I did think that at the time. It's like, well, why? And I wasn't best pleased.
You spoke about crying under the bed sheets for those first 4 days. Was it like sort of learning to suppress emotions then?
Yeah, I mean, I think schools in those days, there was plenty of bullying. Some of the teachers were interesting, and you just had to basically get on with it. I mean, you really did have to get on with it. And you didn't show, as a sort of youngster in an all boys school, you didn't show any weakness, because weakness got bullied. So
talking about like being packed off and stuff, even now, is it quite emotionally wrenching?
Oh no, I think no, but I think it was for a bit. But I think I'm aware that it was a fairly seismic moment in my relationship with my parents. And I think I probably inherited from my mum. That I think I remember the sort of things like that just get notched down and remembered, and it takes a lot for me to then forgive it.
And have you been able to?
I tried, with my mum, but it was just, I don't think we ever got there.
Really? I mean, relationships with parents are so formative, aren't they?
So exactly, and so how the hell do you have a relationship with a kid when you write them a letter once a week? Yeah. That's my bit. Is like, that's a hell of a relationship. My mother, I think, was not the most maternal. That has an effect.
So the wall that some people, like let's say some of the Celtic nations, found it easy to get peeved with you about, the Will Carling confidence.
Yeah.
Was that a defence mechanism then to all that stuff?
No, I think. I think you have to be very controlled, and you. So whatever they thought was an arrogance and a this facade. For me, that was I've got to be under control. Everything's got to be under control. You're meant to be, you're a captain, you're a leader. You're meant to be prepared and everything else. But my issue, to a certain extent, with the Celtic nations, or any other nation, was something different. Was just they're all allowed to be passionate, right? And the Welsh are and the Scots, whereas the English, we aren't. And that used to frustrate the hell out of me, because this was my dream since I was, 7, playing for England. I never thought I would. But you're thinking, it's my dream. I'm incredibly passionate about that. Whereas, and it is the case, if the English ever talk, passionately, well, they're being arrogant. And it's quite bizarre. And you think, but I want to be passionate about playing for England. I listen to the Scots and the Irish and the Welsh and the French, and why can't we be passionate? But we're not allowed to be, because we're England and we're meant to be like the big brother and all that. And I'm like, I don't buy into any of that stuff. This is my dream, and I want to be passionate about it.
Do you think, had you not been packed off to boarding school at 6, you would have played for England?
I've never really thought.
Or captain England?
I don't know, actually. I think so, because I think the captaincy was not necessarily that. I don't think that. I think that if the resilience comes in different ways, and the captaincy, I think, was more down to an interest in people. I have an interest in people. Although I think probably I poured so much emotion into it, because I think that became, when I was asked to captain, that for me, in a very bizarre way, that became my family, and I was going to look after it.
Yeah. Is that why you studied psychology at university then?
I think I just fascinate. Yeah, people fascinate me. I remember I went to a school, the sort of senior school, which was on the edge of the Lake District, and they had this captain's book. And I remember reading, go back years about the way captains saw things. And this was just schoolboy level, but some of it was fascinating, And so I've always been interested in that, in what makes people succeed, what makes certain people thrive under pressure, who can deal with it, who can't, why, who are good leaders, why. I find people interesting.
And do you think Jeff Cook, it was Jeff Cook, wasn't it? Do you think Jeff Cook picked up on that interest in other people in you, which is why he made you captain, the youngest ever England captain at 22?
So Lisa obviously didn't tell you the story about going up to see him.
No.
So a few years ago, her mum lives up in Yorkshire, so we were going up to see her, and I said, oh, by the way, we're going to go and have lunch with Jeff Cook on the way. And she went, why? I said, well, because I've never asked him why he made me captain. So she went, oh, this will be interesting. And so I was sort of, contemplating it the whole way up, and Jeff, being Jeff, is a good sort of Yorkshireman, just said, which I forgot, my first year playing, we had 4 captains. So he said, basically, it was the last roll of the dice. And I'm like, oh, great. So it was quite a journey home, which Lisa just couldn't stop laughing about. But I saw in his own way.
Work, though.
Yeah, I don't know what I think. When I've had a serious chat with him, whether it's I wanted to win, and but he just always said, he said you can mix with and you interact well with all sorts of people, and England as they are now, there's a whole cross section of, there's solicitors, there's builders, there's carpenters. In those days, there were policemen. And you just you get on with them because you're interested in them.
So you're in the army for a bit, and you do a bloody good accent, actually. I've watched a few videos of yours. You've done a really good one of Brian Moore. It's worth checking out on YouTube. But the Welsh guy in the army who taught you about leadership, could you just tell me what he taught you about leadership? Because that basically relates to what you just said. And if you could do it in the accent, I'd be really grateful.
my Welsh accent, you see. I love
Excellent.
a Welsh accent. But although I never quite understood about the Welsh, is like, so there we were now. And you're like, well, it's not now then, was it? And that's the bit that confused me. All your Welsh mates go, I tell you what, back in 97 now. And you go, well, how's it now? Anyway, no, the Welsh, I remember sitting on the top of this mound on an exercise. It must have been about 3 a.m. because I was meant to be an officer. But I was at university, so I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Sort of story of my life. And I'd said to the commanding officer when we were on like a 3-week exercise. I said, "Can I just go as a soldier in the back of the vehicle because I can't pretend to be an officer. I don't know what the hell I'm doing." And they know I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So eventually, he said, "Well, yeah, okay." So after 2 or 3 days of being in the back, they started chanting to you. So all my experience had been officers telling you why they were great leaders, and you were watching them, and that was fine. And then this guy, it was just really simple. And I was talking to him, and I said, "Come on," I said, "best officers." Best, why? What is it? And he was just like, I tell you what it was, Will. He said, it's fairness. He said, the best ones, he said, it's about they treat us all. They say, these are the values. This is the way, this is the way I want you to behave. And they treat all of us exactly the same. He said, the bad ones have favourites. They don't behave the way they talk. He said, so it's an honesty and it's a fairness. He said, the two simplest things. And he said, and the best officers I've ever had, they behave with their values. And he said, and they treat us absolutely fairly. And he said, and those guys, and he said, I love them. He said, the others, not so much.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like honesty and fairness. And, everyone looks for like magic bullets or golden bullets of how to be successful or whatever. But the same thing keeps coming up whenever I speak to successful, sporty people like yourself is that it is the simple, the basic stuff done well.
And I think it is. And I think looking after your guys, right? Caring about them. And I think some people, if you're going to lead someone, like if you're going to lead me, this sort of, I always take it back to a lot of, my experiences. Why would I follow you, right? I'll follow you if I genuinely think you have my best interest at heart and you care about me, then I'll follow you. If you've just been put in a position of leadership and you're just going to tell me what to do and you're really not that fussed about me or where I'm trying to go or what I'm trying to do, I'm not interested in following you. And so I think you've got to invest in people emotionally and look after them and care about them. Then you can earn some trust and then you can start leading them. But and
it's got to be genuine care, like you can't, because you can smell that fakeness.
Absolutely. And a lot of the time, I think in sport it has to be authentic. You have to. Exactly as you say, but I still think people in business con themselves that they won't get found out, and people put their hand up for a position, they go for promotion, and then they convince themselves that actually I'm doing this for the right reasons, and you're thinking you're not. Because I remember sitting with Owen and saying, one of the things I think you need to question, which I did with me, is you say yes to being captain of England, and it's work out why. Why did you say yes? What is it you want to do? What is it you want to achieve? And winning rugby matches is just a given. What are the other bits? And I think sometimes with people in business, they put their hand up and then you go, why are you leading? Be honest about why you're leading. Because if it is to do with your career or promotion you're not going to be a great leader. And I think far too many sort of just convince themselves I'm doing this for the right reasons. And you go, you're not.
Yeah, well, there's that old saying, isn't it? There's the reasons we say we do things, and then the real reasons.
Yeah, and people see the real reasons right?
More easily than people themselves.
And people and I don't understand why people delude themselves and think, no, I'll get it. I can. They won't see this. And you think, oh, they see it very, very quickly.
Yeah. So you were the youngest England captain, age 22, dropped in without any PR experience, so very different to sort of now. And you spoke about the guys who were in your team, older, more experienced guys than you. So, yeah, very different than if you were to be captain now.
Yeah, and I remember being petrified. All these guys were my heroes. I'd been at school watching them on TV. So I was blown away the year before just being in the team, and I genuinely was. And then you have this just slightly surreal moment where you're the youngest by 3 or 4 years, certainly 3, and you're announced as captain, and that's just and I remember the room. I remember Jeff announcing to them that I would be captain, and there was just silence. It was just like awkward.
How did you feel?
It was awful.
Really?
But Peter Winterbottom, who's a guy who played then, who was like, still is my hero, straight talking Yorkshireman. So I years later, I said, they all went down to the bar, and I said, so what did you say? He said, basically we were taking odds. He said, we're having a bet. Because exactly what Jeff said, we'd had 4 captains the year before. So it was almost like it was fast track out of the team. So they were going, he said, we're all there going 2-3 games max. That, he said that was the conversation. It was just like, yeah, best of luck.
Yeah. But actually, so you did do the absolute biz though, didn't you? And I was, again, trawling through the archives, and your approach seemed to be to sort of get buy-in from the guys who did have more experience. So look to get them and ask them, okay, what do we need to do? So you're trying to get views and opinions and input from lots of different areas. And also you would do things like stick little notes under their doors, which you've spoken about, men having that front. But actually, it was those little emotional notes or whatever actually would be the stuff that would hit them often the hardest.
And I think it is. I just think it is. Yeah, I remember standing up in front of them, and I said this many times, and I was petrified. But I remember what just really hit me was, geez, they've got all the experience, they've got all the knowledge, and I thought they were great players. All I need to do is to get them to talk. Tell me, what do we need to change, right? How do we need to start playing? Because I wanted to win. And I think that was the bit that Jeff said. I wanted to win, right? Wearing an England shirt is one thing, but winning in it is what it's about. And therefore, that's what I wanted to define us. And so it was almost like, give me all your ideas, give me the best ideas. And we got to change. And there were some of them who didn't want to change, and you knew. And those guys, they went. And that's just sadly, that's sport, that's teams, that's life. But I think part of it was little bits and pieces where you do care. So you'd write them notes, and you'll get told that, next month, sod off. But lots of guys, since I just said, I appreciated that, mate. I think we all do appreciate it. I think there's that bit, and I don't think this is particularly just male, but I think it's very male. Is certainly in a rugby team, you sort of go, so, you all right, mate? Yeah, good. Yeah, I'm good. And if you just take a pause and then look at it and go, really? And watch someone, you'd realise you're not. Come on, and then you go, talk to me. So I think lots of people, we operate with the face we put out there, and then there's the real us. And I think the challenge when you're captain is to get to the real person. And that's hard work. And there was one of the, and I won't give him a name, one of the current guys. One of the things I do want them to do is look after each other when the pressure comes on. Look after each other. I said it's important. I think one of the things as an old guy, Uncle Bill, you realise is it's the relationships that you build, that they will build while they play, that last all the time and that are really, really important. And one of the guys was being a bit down, and he told me all this stuff, and I said, I'd love to use that as an example. And he was like, I don't want to appear soft in front of the boys. So there's still that,
Yeah.
And he's about the least soft guy that you could think of. And but it's little bits that even, rugby players, you just think, that's nice, because you think he cares about me. And I think we appreciate being cared about.
I know you there, again, this is from Lisa, you value the fact then that, like, the mental health chat that's going on at the moment in sport and in society, and people opening up about being more vulnerable and more authentic, that is a very positive thing. Is that true? Do you think that, to what extent do you think that's a good thing? And B, is it really happening in rugby?
I think it is. I think we are all vulnerable, right? I think that's the crazy thing. And not now, because obviously most people don't know that you played, but when you just stopped playing, people used to talk about and ask you, about what it's like building up to a game. And they'd be surprised when you said, you know what, and early in the week, I was scared, I was petrified, you were lonely, and they're like, what? You were? And you go, yeah. And they're like, scared of being hurt. You go, no, not scared of being hurt, scared of not being good enough, scared of letting your teammates down, scared of freezing. Those are the bits that, and we are all vulnerable. And I think it's rather, I remember, you read quotes about bravery. Bravery is not about not being scared. It's about being scared but still doing it. And I think that's the bit, is that managing emotions, you can't stop them. But I think, for me, the really strong guys are the guys who, they do feel all those things, but they still go out and perform.
Yeah.
That's strong. And if you don't feel those emotions, then I think, to a certain extent, you're either not being honest or you're not functioning properly, because we all have them.
Yeah.
So I don't see why we have to pretend that we don't. That's not macho. For me, it's just bloody stupid.
And I know you speak about like the relationships that you developed through rugby and how valuable they are, particularly now looking back. And the 4 days before a match, you actually said that you miss that fear the most, like being together. And even before, like I remember you said the French games, it was the most violent game. That actually, though, that intense feeling of fear and of worry, but you'd all be there sharing it together.
Yeah, I think those, in that part of your life, you think that was, for me, the really special bits were those, and that's what I was saying to the current guys. It's not. People go, so what was the greatest moments in your game? Thinking they were tries or something that happened on the pitch. It was for me. It was never that. It was it was in meeting rooms. It was on training pitches. It was knowing you were going through those emotions, and you all knew you were going through those emotions, but you went through it. You walked down the tunnel, and you played those games, and you looked after each other. And I think that for me is, there's just moments in changing rooms afterwards, and you're lying on the floor. And you look across at one of the guys and you sort of smile and you go, shit, that was good. And you can't ever explain that to someone, because they didn't go through all the stuff that you went through. But you think that for me was what I loved. And that's maybe the contradiction in me is that, yes, there's a very sensitive side. There's also quite a ruthless, brutal side of, I want to win and I will do what it takes to win. And I expect everyone else, as we walk out there, to be exactly the same, to be as disciplined, to be as ruthless and as focused. And that's the two extremes of me, is that I will look after you with everything but I expect you to give me absolutely everything you've got.
Yeah. And that key to winning, then, from what you've said, it's like it wasn't about the glory of Will Carling, which I guess, it could be easy for many leaders to fall into that trap.
Yeah, it's a team game. So, whether you're captain or not, it was never about that. I remember for me, it was like when I got sacked as captain.
With the 57 farts, is that it?
Yeah, that was the one. And he said, you're no longer the captain. And I said, oh, okay. I said, Dennis, can I just ask you one thing? I said, I can still go to the World Cup. He said, yeah. I said, okay, fine. I put the phone down and people said, were you devastated? I said, no. Because actually all I ever wanted to do was lift the World Cup. I don't care if I was first or last, right? Actually, it was never, that sort of stuff has never been important to me. So the glory of a captaincy, no, it's just you want to win because you're wearing a shirt that was your dream. And therefore I hated losing in that. And I'm at least probably, I hate losing at anything. But that was it for me. And therefore, and those guys, I loved them. And so therefore I wanted us to win. That's where you belonged. And losing to people, I hated that.
So I know you give talks on leadership and people value what you've got to say. And obviously we've spoken about it's getting to know the difference between the front that we all have, the public facing persona and the real person. What are the other gems you share about the keys to leadership? Or is it, we've had honesty and what was the other one? Honesty and that Welsh fella, what did he say? Honesty and fairness, that's it. Yeah, that's
that
it.
Welsh fella. Yeah. Oh, there's loads of I think communication, I think I think is honest communication and encouraging honest communication. And people sort of like how, and the rugby guys will laugh. Go, I introduce upward appraisal, right? And people sort of, and you're like, wow. And then people go in business and say, but we have upward appraisal, but it's anonymous. You go, and what is the point of that? If there's so little trust that it has to be anonymous, don't you think you have an issue? For me, early on, that was incredibly brutal, but you have to do it. And I think, we had what's been fascinating for me has been listening. There's been two brilliant psychologists in with the England guys recently, and one of the phrases one of them used was absolutely brilliant. Was that in really great teams they have honest communication. In the teams that don't get where they need to, they just fail to have those conversations that are awkward, that are uncomfortable. They just get put off. Now, whether that's conversations or meetings, and everyone's just, I'll do it tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And those are the bits, I think, if we're all honest, you go, yeah, I've done that. Where you sort of see someone across the room and think, we really need to talk through this issue. And then you go, oh, dear, I'll do it tomorrow. And you don't do it, and then you put it off. And it's, those kind of things are so important to where you need to be as a team. Because I think, teams are the strength of the relationships. And I talk about internal coaching. I think, you should start coaching each other. We will look at external coaches, you do in sport. But once you start coaching each other, because you're the guys who go out there, then you become very powerful. So there's all sorts of little bits and pieces that I think in chats about leadership. Most of it, I think, if you think about it long enough, is common sense. But strangely and bizarrely, a lot of the time it doesn't happen, certainly not in a business world.
Yeah. So tough conversations. Interestingly, I spoke to Alistair Cook recently, and he had said that the England cricket team had a few where they really sort of aired their dirty laundry, and it would sort of spring them forward into a period of success. Is there ever a time then when having those tough conversations can be counterproductive, or do you think they're always of value, having tough conversations?
I think it's always of value, but I think even so listening to us, but it has to be almost continuous, because things are happening all the time. Relationships are changing all the time. New people are coming in to the team. People are leaving the team. So it's not. I'm not talking necessarily about the big sort of team airing, reviewing what happened in this game. Why do we lose it? There's just constant little bits. I think you have 30, 50 people, which say the current squad is, when they're operating. There's going to be all sorts of issues that lie under the surface, different relationships with different people, whether that's coaches, whether that's players. And you constantly got to be talking about those things, because issues just slowly build up. And I think you're always going to be more successful if you confront those things early on, if you're honest about them. And understand that. I think that's the weird thing that I found. People seem to think that if you play for England or any national team, you must all be best mates. And you go, no, we weren't, right? And they're going, oh, wow. And you go, because you're human beings. You have some really good mates. You have some other that you think are mates. And then you have some that you think, no, I'm not going to go for a beer with you. And they think exactly the same about you. But you respect each other. And, geez, you'd look after each other on the pitch. But there's that thing that you don't all have to be mates, but you have to be honest and respectful and and fair with each other. As long as you are that, then you'll be a successful team.
And those tough conversations, that can be applied to business, to relationships, to everything.
Yeah, I think it can. Family. There's different ways of having them, but I mean, yeah, because I think relationships. It's about communicating.
Yeah. Right, a quick word on inferiority complexes, right?
All right.
Change of pace. So I mentioned to you, I was a very young lad watching England lose the World Cup final in 1991. Do you think that reaching the final after... So you'd had what? You'd won the Grand Slam in 91, then you'd gone into the World Cup, got to the World Cup final. People say England changed their style of play going into that final. Do you think that was to do with having an inferiority complex?
What, changing the style of play?
Or the defeat generally, the whole thing?
I don't think we believed we were the best side in the world, primarily because we weren't. The change of tactics, it was quite interesting. I took some of the older guys down to meet the current squad, and two of them were Brian Moore and Peter Winterbottom came down. And so after a few glasses of wine in the bar, Moore was still going on about, the final. And we were sort of saying, Maura, if you remember, we changed tactics, nothing to do with Campese or the media. We had played Australia that summer and got beaten 40 points to 15. They hammered us, right, playing what was the sort of game that we'd played in the Grand Slam and early on. So we just thought, I remember spending 2 days, we've got to do some things differently. And I think that the big mistake we made was not, during the game, realising actually we're dominating far more up front than we thought we would be. So we could tighten up, we could do a few things. But I think Peter Wince and I are both the same opinion. We actually made enough chances in that game to win. We just didn't take them. Australia made fewer, but they took them. So, and I think that's just the honest appraisal of they were a better team than us.
But if you're making more chances and not converting them, couldn't that also be down to the fact that there is that lack of
absolutely.
belief?
There's a lack of precision, the lack of all that. And I think we rarely played the Southern Hemisphere teams. And I think that's something Clive Woodward was very clever in what he changed. That he regularly played them and ended up getting rid of that inferiority complex. But I do think when we came up against them, like the New Zealand, the All Blacks or whatever, there was this whole mental thing of, oh Christ, we very rarely beat these people. And sport is confidence, it's belief. And yeah, I think in 90, we didn't have that.
It's so interesting. Like if you know, what's the saying? If you believe you can, you probably can. If you believe you can't,
you definitely won't.
Yeah.
And
I saw Clive Woodward was very clever in he would refuse to call them the All Blacks, or would only ever refer to them as New Zealand, which does give them an altogether different hue.
And actually, and what I remember reading it a few years ago, and what New Zealand, the All Blacks, whatever you want to do very, very well, even all their big ex-players is, there's the constant nurturing of the myth. If you ever listen, if you read the interviews, all the ex-players talk about, the All Blacks and the record, and there is just the constant momentum of, this juggernaut keeps rolling, and people don't beat the All Blacks, and it's very, very clever and very well done.
Yeah, right. Done your rugby career, right? You went through a rough period. Golden boy to suddenly down there, people tutting and all this kind of jazz. Your business had taken a bit of hit and your testimonial was cancelled, which cost you an absolute shed load of cash. What was it like going through that?
It was horrible, but self-inflicted. I think that's... I was talking to some people the other day about, rugby had been my focus since I was 7. It consumed me. And therefore, it suddenly goes, and it's bizarre how you're rudderless. I had probably 3 years of just chaos, which a lot of it, self-inflicted. You're not intentionally trying to get things wrong. You just get lots of things wrong. You make bad decisions, but it's a horrible. I remember I rented a flat in Covent Garden, which had underground parking, so people couldn't see, or the press couldn't see my car out on the road, and I didn't open the blinds for a year. I lived there for a year. I didn't open the blinds once.
Bloody hell.
My parents didn't even have the number. They didn't know where I lived.
Jeez.
No one knew where I lived, right? And that's quite weird. And, you basically got followed almost every day for a long, long period of your life. And that is horrible.
Yeah.
And I think there's different bits that people don't see in terms of the media, or certain, and I think we all know certain parts of the media. I remember when Lisa and I got together, and she was pregnant, and we were walking towards a court session, and there were about 4 or 5, and they were trying to trip her up, and they were going, "Come on, Will, you're a man. What are you going to do?"
Jeez.
And that's the bit where you look at them and you think, Jesus, one day. And then you just know that, but I tell you, there's some horrible parts to it. But you do, I think, being sensitive. Yeah, I struggled with it. But then the positive is that I had smoke blown up my arse for 10 years of, you're this comic book hero, and then you are absolutely flawed and you are rock bottom. And I tell you what, it makes you reassess your values and everything else and what's important. And it's a really good kick in the, and you sort of think, I'd like to think you learn a lot. You're probably a far nicer person because of it. You wouldn't choose it, but I think it. You come out the other side and you think, actually, yeah, this is what I think is important. This is the way I think I should behave, and yeah.
So it was a bit a blessing in disguise.
Oh, hey, that's the way I tend to look at it. Maybe that's the way I look at life. But I think maybe if I had come out, and had testimony and everything else, you would have thought, "Do you know what, I really am very special," and which is not pleasant, And I never genuinely thought, I never thought that, but you just sometimes you get flawed like that for a period, and actually you think, "Oh, hey, there's it's taught you a lot."
Yeah, brought you back down to earth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now, Lisa's again was singing your praises. She's got your back, your wife. It's lovely, I love it. Saying you're not that big I am at all.
I've never believed in that. No, I'm not into bullshit, and I'm not into people who pretend. Never have been, and I think a lot of fame is bullshit. But I suppose you it's interesting because as a sportsman, it's always going to end, right? And I remember when I resigned as captain, it's quite hard because I'd been captain for sort of nearly 9 years. You've sort of grown up as much as I grew up from sort of 22 to 30 as England captain, and suddenly you give it up. And I remember for months thinking, so who am I? That's quite interesting to sort of think, you had been that for so long, and you'd given up, and now you weren't. And I remember watching, when Jono's lot won the World Cup. I remember the night before, Lisa, we were down in Sydney, and I said to her, what I really worry about is that I'll be bitter if they win. I said, that really worries me. I don't want to feel like that. And I remember talking to one of the production guys who, when Johnny dropped the goal and the final whistle went, he said that you were sitting in the studio and you were smiling. And I said, I know, because I was so relieved that I was happy. Yeah. Nothing to, because I thought, God, I don't want to be one of these bitter guys who spends his whole life going, I could have done that. I should have done that. Yeah. But you just think, I'm just delighted that they had. And I was pleased that I was delighted. You're thinking, oh God, that's a relief. Yeah. It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah. So you say, asking yourself the question, who am I, right? If someone had said to you, right, who are you? Right, when you were, let's say, the peak of your powers, you just won your third Grand Slam in '95, and then who are you now? Like, how would you answer those two questions differently?
The guy in '95, I think, fundamentally wanted to do the right things. Probably didn't come across sometimes particularly well about that. But the guy now, probably just a little bit more mature in how to approach different situations. But I think fundamentally has the same desire to do the right thing in most situations, but luckily has a wife who has taught him lots and lots of stuff that actually, she's transformed my life, and I think with her, you think family relationships, that is just it for me, and I realise how unbelievably happy those things make you. And maybe that's the bit that I feel incredibly lucky. I loved playing for England, but you have family, and you just think it just pales into, it's just completely, it's a different world. Yeah,
and home and family clearly the most important thing to you. And you don't really have any memorabilia at home, so you're not one of these ex-pros who is still. It's all about being the ex-pro. You're not hanging on to that rugby part of you. Your kids didn't even know that you played rugby, and you had to get an England shirt out of the after the attic. And he said, "No, you never did. You're too fat."
Yeah, that was then, And I think I prefer to live now than live in the past. The past, that's what I did for a period in the past. Whereas I have far more joy and happiness and fun and laughter and childish, but now. And so I think I was very clear that I wanted to be dad rather than. I think I'd met a few guys that I had played with or against, and their kids sort of talked to me about what their dads did, and this is just me. I thought. I want my kids just to think my dad is a fat child, and he just, he's my dad, and I love him because he's my dad. And I want that relationship rather than lots of kids going, oh, your dad, X, Y, and Z. Yeah. So with Jack, it was just a great story. He basically didn't believe it because he said, you're too fat and you're my dad, and. which was brilliant in terms of playing for England. But I'm just not a believer in having it around. I don't need it around. I know what happened, and they don't need to have it around.
I'm not stirring here, but what do you then think of the ex-players who strut around like they're always in their kit still 10, 15, 20 years after they played then?
Part of it is just a bit sad because it ends, right? And there's so many good things in life to get on with and enjoy. Family, for me, being the main one, friendships, you think, but there's so much other things, whether that's you setting up business, whether you're going into charity, there's so many good bits of people to meet in life that you just think, look, that was great, but that's done. Yeah. I actually want to get on and enjoy these. And I think it's a bit sad when guys are just still stuck in, do you know what, I used to play. And you're thinking, wow, if you're not really not found anything else that you love that brings you satisfaction and stuff, then and I hope they do one day, because I just think, yeah, it's great, but it's for that period of time, and then there's lots more to do.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Last couple of bits. I want to talk to you about your chance and very important, it sounds like, meeting with John Cleese and John Cleese's wife.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I got a card. It's one of those things that was written to the Petersham Hotel, which is where we used to stay. And I sort of opened this card, and it was from John Cleese, and I'm thinking, this is a wind up, just here's my number if you ever want to meet. And I'm like, John Cleese. So sort of went to meet him, and buddy, outstanding. And his wife then was a practicing psychoanalyst, so was chatting away to her, and just sort of found it interesting. And I just said to her, Alice, could I come and talk to you properly about about me? And she said, yeah. So I used to go and see her.
How long did you see her for?
Saw her for 18 months, 2 years probably.
Was there anything in particular that you were addressing? Was it your family stuff?
It was relationships. I was getting relationships badly wrong. Not obviously that ever became public. And I wanted to find out why, and try and learn and not get them so badly wrong. And part of it was, about my mum, my family. So talked a lot about my mum, a lot about me, relationships, and I learned. The one thing which was quite amusing, which was me, was just I wouldn't lie on, I didn't lie on the sofa. It was like, no, I'm going to sit opposite. I'm going to talk to you, right? And I don't know whether that was me going, look, but that was the only thing. But I found it fascinating. I found it, incredibly helpful, and I'd like to think, it made a massive difference.
So you said it's about it gives you a clear understanding of why you do things, and then the challenge is changing the things that you do. So you never had a sort of a hang up about therapy, which is kind of forward thinking of you if it was that many years ago in particular, because still some people have a bit hung up about it.
Yeah, well, I suppose my view on most things is if someone has some knowledge in whatever area it is, and I'm not doing that particularly well, then I'll go and ask you to, give me some advice and help, and I never have an issue with that. And therefore, I was quite patently not doing particularly well in relationships and all that side. And so, here's someone who could help you. I just don't get why there's an issue with that.
No.
And I know, some people do have that, but I don't. I just sort of think it's like the kids, Lisa and the kids, she has a trainer, and the kids have been going down, and I said, I'd come. And like the kids go, what, you would ask Paul, you're meant to know about training. I go, but there's loads of stuff. There's loads I don't know about training. And I've loved going down there, and he's helped me, lots of different bits and pieces. And you think, well, yeah, I don't have an issue with any of that sort of stuff. So with Alice, it was, you recognise sort of cycles of behaviour, and you start to realise what triggers them, and then it's up to you to try and recognise that and think, right, let's not fulfil this bloody cycle, and let's try and let me try and change how I'm now going to behave for the next hour, week, month, sort of thing. I think it's it's up to us. You just think without sounding really trite, or you just think you just learn as you go along the bits that make you happy. And I was also saying, you go back to that sort of 16-year-old kid, and it's not lots of money. It's not fame. It's, those things, hey, bits of them are okay, and bits of money, money. But the stuff that, it's said so often, but actually you just think, it doesn't take long when you get to sort of my 50, you're thinking, the bits that really, really make me happy are the relationships. And, what we're really lucky, and I think maybe it's, Lisa's half a talent, we basically as a family sit down for dinner almost every evening. Okay, not when the kids are at school, but every evening the holiday. And when they're all back, and I said to her, it never gets better than when you listen to laughter, right, around that. That is as good as it gets for me. And I think there is just nothing that, and lots of, the kids sort of say, God, very few of our friends ever, sit down regularly for dinner. And you think, for me, it's that greatest part of the day when they're on holiday, because they're doing what they want to do. And then in the evening, even they go, what time, they always ask, what time's dinner? And we sit down, and that's when you have that hour, an hour and a quarter, and you think, shit, it's great. Most of the time, it's laughter because, I'm a child. And then sometimes, you have a serious chat or, a bit of an issue because, they are 16 and, sort of 19. But you think, and then the older ones are there. But most of the time you think, wow, it's bloody great.
Yeah. So, I was going to say, what's it all about? And you've pretty much summed it up, I guess, there. But if you had to say, what's it all about, what would it be?
I think it's the quality of your relationships. It's the people you love, and that family, friends. And I think that is, sometimes, with more, you think, hey, we're all going to die. So when you go, what is it that, and for me, I would like the kids or your friends to think, what, he, made me laugh, made me smile. He was a good guy. That's it. That's all you can do. The rest of it is irrelevant.
Will Carling, England's most successful captain, well, bar Martin Johnson. They say don't meet your heroes. You've proved it wrong. It's been an absolute treat. Thank you very much for coming.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Life Lessons podcast. I would be delighted to hear your thoughts, your ideas, your guest suggestions, your questions. Just get in touch via my website, simonmundie.com. And if you could share this episode with someone you know or on social media, I would be very grateful, as it does really help people to find this podcast. That's it for now. I will be back with a bite-sized episode this Friday and another full-length episode next week. Until then, goodbye.